Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on A World Awakening. And if you were just watching Soul School, we apologize for having to hop out so quickly so that we could get this show set up. So, class dismissed came very quickly. I don't know if you've seen the commercial where the professor is putting up something on the screen and he's got this whole huge room full of students, and what comes up on his screen is him playing cards or doing magic tricks. And one of his students pulls the plug for him and he's like, okay, everyone get out of class. It was one of those moments, just one of those moments. So, sorry for hop, skipping, and jumping, but sometimes Jeff and I get going and the energy rises and it changes and the light gets brighter and everything toward the end of the show. So, Bill, we apologize. He's laughing. Oh, God, we love you, sweetheart. We love you. And thank you for being so patient with us when we get all riled up inside, which we do. And Jeff, I so appreciate, I know you're feeling under the weather, sweetheart. And I deeply appreciate you joining me for the second show tonight. Deb DeRoos and I are gathering with a bunch of women in April. The one and only event that I have planned for the year. The only time I'm getting on a plane, probably for the foreseeable future. And Greta and I are going to go and do an event up at Houghton Lake, a spiritual retreat at the end of April. And so we were going to do the show about that and what, people who join us should expect and so on. And then Deb got COVID. So this was a perfect opportunity to give her a chance to rest and recover and recuperate properly. And for us to discuss something that I came across. I have many shows out on Gaia. I've done open minds with Regina Meredith a number of times. I've, sat and done interviews over the years with them on various topics. And the other day, because I'm subscribed to it, I had a little thing pop up that I sent to you and said, now look at this. This woman is saying exactly what I have been saying for 50 years.
Yeah.
And that is, if you want to make contact, if you know, not believe necessarily, but know that we are not alone in the universe. And this I know from childhood. I have had encounters, close encounters, some closer than others over the years. And so I'm very much at peace with it. I understand. I know that they are with us, that they are watching, that they love us, that, they are no threat to us. We are the threat to ourselves. These are things that I know. But her brief clip that I sent you from that particular interview was about something that I think is the essential nature of contact. And that is, from the neck up, let it go. Clear your mind completely and make connection from the heart. That is the source of our energy, that it is the organ in our body that, rather than consuming and using energy, actually generates energy, is from our heart. And I remember when I first saw the movie E.T., the Extraterrestrial, and I always thought of, from Close Encounters and E.T., that Spielberg is visionary, and he's also got some inside information that he has used to try to impart these messages to humanity, and has done so, I think, very effectively. There are also people that are stirring up notions that they are somehow a threat to us. And so there's the fear mongers and the fear-based carbon units doing what fear-based carbon units do, because for some reason they feel threatened. And then there's the other side of that coin where there is an embracing and an opening of the heart, and that's the communication core from which we must connect. And that is, of course, the way that I do. I get up every morning and I go outside and I look to the north, which is where, for some reason, my vessels always seem to be. And I start getting the flashes. I haven't seen the light grid in a while, but I do. I see vessels. I get flashes of light and broad daylight that are so cleansing and healing and filled with truth and filled with an entirely different kind of energy than we generate here on the planet. And the connection is here. This is where I feel it. I literally feel it in my sternum, in my core center self. And what I say is very simple. Be known to me. I love you. Thank you for coming. Heal me. Please heal me. Touch me and heal me. And those are the messages that I impart. And healing, I'm not talking just about dealing with cancer right now. This is something that I have asked for lifelong. And so I don't have any animosity. Excuse me. I don't have any animosity toward my condition, because I feel like it exists for a reason. And confronting that reason, having a lot to do with the conversation that we just had on Soul School, that inner conflict. You know, why is this happening? Oh, poor me. Not for a moment have I felt that. Not for a moment have I felt that, because I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe that anything happens to us by accident, by mistake, that everything happens in its right and proper time with purpose and reason. And in so knowing, it has been very easy for me to release myself to the stars, you know, to put my hands into source energy, to a higher power, to what I like to refer to as the higher ups. And I think that it's all connected. It's all related. You know, and I'm, you know, we've discussed many times that I believe that the Christ Jesus came into this world with the same message that is being imparted now. And that if this miraculous event that happened 2,000 years ago or so indeed happened the way that it was chronicled, the only plausible explanation is that Jesus is an extraterrestrial that was sent here to help show us the way to love. And instead of embracing that concept and showing kindness and compassion and support to each other, there were those in power who were threatened by the message. And so they decided to silence him and claim his life. Is, to me, the only plausible explanation for what that event embodied, and the core of his life existence on this planet, and that the message he left behind has touched countless millions and billions of souls ever since. It's the only reason that I have any hope for humanity, especially as, you know, we sit here tonight discussing this in a world at war, and it doesn't need to have a name. I don't know if we are actually in World War III. It feels like we are. That the conflict that exists on this planet, for whatever reason, is so incredibly self-destructive that it's very hard for me to have hope for the future of humanity. As I mentioned in the last show, or I think when I was on with Bishop Long earlier this evening, and before my mother passed away, she sat in my arms, and we were all curled up in her bed, and she started to cry, and I was just holding her and letting her express herself. And her despair, she was able to verbalize her despair, the root of it. And what she said to me was, I was born into a world at war, and I will die in a world at war, and we haven't learned a goddamn thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she's right. She was right. But I can't give up on hope for us. I can't. Because I will never, never accept that all hope is lost. I will not. As long as people like you exist, as long as people like Deb exist, as long as there are people out there that are so pure of heart that we do our very best to be the peacemakers, not just the peacekeepers, but the peacemakers, which requires an exertion of some level of energy and directing ourselves in a purposeful way. And so that's what we do with this show. And that's all part of the notion of a world awakening to our own possibilities, to our own potential, to the best of humanity, and lifting those up who feel downtrodden, who feel like all hope is lost, and who internalize that despair at the risk of their own health and well-being. I was one of those who let anger set up in me, and disgust, contempt, revulsion, that I didn't know what to do with. And because I was not able to expel it from my classroom, from where I am as a student in soul school, it metastasized. And so now I have to do away with it and tell it to be gone from an entirely different perspective, so that on the other side of this, the message can be one of clarity. This happened. This is why it happened. This is how it was resolved. And here I am, alive and well, to tell you about it. And so now that's my new mission in life. But that does not exclude or preclude my deep faith, which has only deepened during the course of the last few months that I am dealing with this. Deepened in a way that I didn't think it could. I thought I was already there. And I have discovered through this incredible challenge that I still had a ways to go. And when you get to the point where you relinquish your own personal power to the stars, to God, to source, to the light, when you relinquish that, and put yourself in the hands, metaphorically speaking, of that which you are a part of, then you're participating in the healing. It's not just handing it off. You're participating in it because you are an expression, a living, breathing, conscious expression of that consciousness.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am now. And I feel peaceful in a way that maybe I shouldn't, maybe I shouldn't feel so peaceful for my situation. And yet I do. And yet I do. And I have to say, Jeff, I credit you as my star brother, as my dear friend, as someone whom I adore. I credit you for helping me walk that path because you were the first one that stretched your hand out and said, take my hand, I'll help you find the way. And you have. And I adore you. I love you deeply. And I don't get to see you enough in person, but that does not in any way affect the intimacy that we achieve in a text message or a phone call or, just being together on the show. So I wanted to talk to you tonight. Did you have a chance to look at the clip that I sent you?
I did, yes. Yes.
Okay. What was your impression? Do you have a different perspective on it than I did? Or
yeah.
How do you feel about what you saw, about it all generating from right here, not here?
Yeah. No, I agree. And again, as I said in the last hour, I apologize if I start coughing or whatever. I am a little under the weather. So pardon me for that. As I'm looking at my face, I'm like, I look like the embodiment of the common cold. I look like whatever. So I apologize. I had to go up and get my old man sweater on in between shows because I'm shaking out here. But it's so good to be with you all tonight. But yes, no, I did watch. I watched it today. I watched it several times. And I agree with it on many, many levels. I agree with it on many levels. The heart emits a field around the body. If anyone's ever looked into the work of the Heart Math Institute, for example, I would encourage you to look that up if you haven't. The heart emits a field around the body. It's not pseudoscience. It's reality. And whatever it is that we are, our heart, whether we're not necessarily talking about the organ pumping in our chest, maybe, but we're talking at least metaphorically about when we feel most deeply, we feel it here. You know what I mean? We feel it here. And when we're trying to tell someone we love someone, even through a text message or whatever, we'll send them a heart emoji. That looks nothing like the organ that beats inside of your chest. In fact, if I sent somebody an image of that, they might get the wrong idea about them, right? But like,
disgusting, yeah.
But somehow, some way that symbol communicates. It means love. It means I'm extending, the deepest part of me to you. And so, yeah, I mean, when we think about whatever it is that we are, right? Fractals of the divine, bearers of the divine image, whatever. It means we are adrift, and I don't mean that in any kind of negative sense of the word, as in like we're shipwrecked or something, but we are, let's just say we are ensconced within a cosmic panoply of divine flora and fauna of varying degrees of consciousness, complexity in regards to consciousness, and whatever those things are, whether you want to call them angels, whether you want to call them demons, extraterrestrials, whatever set of consonants and vowels you want to try to lasso the numinous with, right, and hogtie it with. It'll never be enough, but whatever words you want to try to use to pin those things down, we exist in a universe with these things, right? And all of us, I think, are expressions of greater and lesser degrees of consciousness. There's like gradations, I think, in some way. But who we are here in our core, let's put it this way. So if we're talking about extraterrestrial life, a higher form of consciousness, maybe, or another form of consciousness, or angelic beings, a higher form of consciousness, or another form of consciousness, spiritual entities of whatever kind. I think the notion that the heart emits communications in some sense that links us up with those things is the most reasonable thing one could conclude, you know? And when I watched the video, I was reminded of the verse. There's a passage in Psalms 42:7. It's always been one of my favorite passages from the Jewish Psalter that says, "Deep cries to deep." I love that passage. I've meditated on that for almost 25 years, and the depth of it, no pun intended, absolutely. The depth of it, I've never gotten to even anywhere close to the bottom of it. Like, deep cries to deep. That's the story of my life.
And mine too.
That the deepest part of my being, from my earliest memories, has been crying out for the deep of whatever it is that's out there. And at different times in my life, I've given it different names. I've envisioned it in different ways and in different forms. I followed different philosophical and religious paths in order to find it. You know, for a season, I disregarded all of them, and I was an atheist, and I found meaning in the void of meaninglessness, you know, and then I came back to something like faith and whatever it is that I am now. But I've always been in this place of deep crying to deep, which is the heart expressing itself, the heart here in the microcosm, expressing itself to the heart of the macrocosm, saying, I long to connect with you, whatever you are, whoever you are, whatever your name is, I don't know. I long to connect with you. In my more, and what does that look like? I think it just looks like honesty. I think it looks like honesty. Like, and some people might say, well, I don't know how to do that. You just did it, right?
You did it.
In saying you don't know how to do it, you did it. Why? Because that may have been the first honest thought you verbalized all day when you said, I don't know how to do that. Like, when you vocalize your frustrations at your inability to do a thing, you just spoke from your deep. Your depth just expressed itself and created an opportunity for you to connect with the deep out there. Because, like you said, when you relinquish your own ability to, you know, save yourself in a given situation, and you relinquish yourself to the stars or to God or to whatever it is you're rolling with in that season, you know, it's like the Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a tired phrase to some because they've heard it in a different context. But in AA, they say, you know, let go and let God, right?
Yeah.
And the notion is you have to relinquish yourself to a higher power. Some people think that weak because they're like, no, it should all be within. I'm like, no, that point of surrender where you come to the end of your own perceived abilities, right, and you just let go, and you're in this point of desperation, and you speak that honest truth of, okay, I'm done, can't do it anymore. Well, that honest expression of thought was your deep expressing itself to whatever this deep is out there. And that's the point at which those two things connect. But so many of us spend our lives expressing only the shallows, you know.
Right.
And as much as I love positive thought, and I love positive thought, new thought really saved me at one season in my life. You know, new thought metaphysics and all that kind of stuff, science of mind, you know, Ernest Holmes, Neville Goddard, a lot of these giants of the new thought school of thinking, Florence Scovel Shinn. I love these guys. Saved my thinking, saved my mind at one point in my spiritual and my spiritual journey. But I've also found that sometimes that could put me in a place where I'm not actually speaking from my deep. Because maybe what I actually need to say in a moment is, I feel terrible and incapable of doing what it is I know that I need to do. And if all I say instead is the opposite, like, I feel wonderful and fully capable of doing whatever it is I'm supposed to do, like just in kind of like a daily motivational sort of thing, that's fine. But if in that moment of real crisis, I mean real crisis, like real crisis, and I've had a few of those in my life, if I had just simply given into like positivity platitudes, I would not have had the breakthroughs that I've had. But instead, in those moments, like instead in those moments, I've had moments where I screamed into the dark of night. until there was not a sound that I could make anymore. My voice was gone. I was crying out to God with every fiber of my being, as though my life depended on it, because it did in fact depend on it, right? And I mean, I cried and I groaned and I travailed until I couldn't make a sound anymore, until I was as hoarse as whatever, but there in that moment, I got to the end of myself. My deep expressed itself, and it wasn't a positive deep, but it was truth. It was honesty. It was reality. And then when I came to the end of that, there was this sweet release of, I can't say anymore. I can't do anymore. If crying was going to get me into this, well, I guess I just bought my ticket. I don't know. Like I'm done at this point. And then it's at that point that everything begins to shift somehow, some way. Things just begin to shift and things begin to turn around and transform. But there had to be that expression of the depth of my heart to the heart of the deep I was crying out to. And so whatever it is we're looking to connect with, on a metaphysical level, on a spiritual level, on a ufological level, or whatever, it is the heart crying out to the heart that makes the difference.
And it is soul speak.
It is.
I think that it is that buried within this core of us is the everything. Yeah. And the everything is our soul, our consciousness, our ability to emote. And by suppressing that, by internalizing it, by denying it, by failing to acknowledge that inner conflict, that turmoil that we all live in at some point or another, and some of us live in perpetually. To deny it, and like my friend Erin says, it's not all pixies and unicorns and flowers and fairy dust, it's not. And to claim that it is, a lot of people who claim to be spiritualists, that's how they envision the world. And that's lovely. And a lot of times it is all unicorns and rainbows and pixie dust and fairy tales and, and that's lovely. And that's part of it, but it's not the whole. And if we are going to live whole, if we are going to awaken to our purpose, I've read a lot over the years about spiritualists that talk about old souls. And how the old souls are gathering, and that's how we find our twin flames, or our soulmate, or whatever, that we come back here as recycled entities to find our way to in some Eastern religion is considered nirvana or a utopia, perfection, heaven. And that we find our way to heaven together. And if we're lucky enough to find our soulmate, then, we go through that process and teach each other and learn from each other together. But I think that, there's that we are able to conceptualize consciousness, to recognize consciousness as source energy, to assume that we have this part deep in us that makes us pure and whole and true, and that is our soul. And many people think there is one divine mind and that we all tap into it. It has nothing to do with the brain. The brain is an organ that functions a very specific way to make all the rest of the vessel work. But it's not necessarily mind. That there is one soul and one mind that we all tap into as part of God consciousness, as an expression of that which created us initially. and gave us the ability to recreate ourselves, reproduce ourselves. I know you're struggling mightily with having to let go of your eldest daughter for a period of time and sending her way far away to the other side of the country, south to Florida, and how conflicted you are about that. I will tell you that when my father dropped me off at Chatham College in Pittsburgh in 1976, he brought my Uncle Donald along for the trip because he knew how bad it was going to be for him letting go of me for the first time in his life.
Yeah.
That I wasn't going to be there. And he told me just last week, we were talking about this, and he says, I don't know if you know this. He said, but Donald had to drive all the way back to Rhode Island from Pennsylvania because I couldn't stop crying. I had not ever seen my father express himself to me the way he did that day.
Yeah.
And I'm there and I'm excited, and it's time to move my stuff up to my dorm room. And this is a whole new adventure for me. And I'm on this great new journey in this great new place. And he is suffering from the depths of despair and worry. And how will I be on my own? And I won't have him there to scoop me up if I fall and scrape my knee. And he took that so hard. It was a lifetime, 17 years. It was the first time that he said, I love you to me.
Wow.
In my whole life. It's not that I didn't feel the love. It's not that I didn't know that he loved me and my mother and my sisters. Of course he loved us. He showed us in myriad ways how much he loved us. But those words, to be able to verbalize them, didn't happen until I was 17 years old and he was having to let go of me. And it was traumatizing to him. Absolutely traumatizing to him that all these years later, as an 89-year-old man, confessing to me that his brother had to drive him home because he was crying too hard to be able to see the road.
Wow.
Was a very healing, purifying, clarifying expression of the depths of love.
Yeah.
And it took him 89 years to tell me.
Wow. Yeah.
So get ready, sweetheart. Buckle up, buttercup.
Yeah. I mean, if I have a flaw, it's probably telling my people I love them too often, because the word becomes, it might seem overdone, but sheesh. Yeah. No. But that expression, though, that deep can well up in us for a lifetime.
Well, he was guarding his heart.
Exactly.
Because so many men feel like expressing themselves emotionally, especially when it comes to their deepest affection for another, is a sign of weakness, when actually it is a sign of strength.
Yeah. And that's a bug and not a feature of evolution, I think. Men evolved to feel that their primary role was protector, and in evolving to feel that that's the primary role, you feel like weakness is something you can't show. And weakness can be interpreted by an individual not as being weak, but as just being vulnerable, right? Because vulnerability can be interpreted by someone as being weak, but to love is to be vulnerable, right?
Yes.
To love is to be vulnerable. It's to expose, to walk uprightly. When you hear people talk, in biblical language, someone who walks upright, right? To walk upright is to walk with all of your
soft underbelly exposed,
right? And that's at some point, this primate decided to do that, right? We all did. Instead of to, be quadrupeds, we decided to expose and to walk uprightly. And part of becoming truly human, in a spiritual sense, is learning to walk uprightly, in the sense that you express and you show and you let the deep of your heart express itself. And in terms of my own daughter, though, I have been guarding myself from feeling it. Like, I have been, we've been spending a lot of time together, a lot of come here, watching our goofy shows we watched when she was a little kid together, and, having the good times we love to have with each other. But I have not, I said it in the last show, I have not allowed myself to feel it yet. I have been keeping my heart closed off to that emotion. My wife's been very vulnerable for months feeling it. And I think maybe that's even partly why, because I feel like I got to be the one who's like, it's okay, we're going to be all right. Don't worry. We get, but I'm also
call her every 15 minutes, whether she likes it or not. Yeah,
yes, exactly. And the great thing about her is she's never been the like, Dad, don't hug me in public. Drop me off like, half a block down. And, she's never been like that. She's always like the one who wants to be right there. So I love it. So I know we will be on the phone all the time. I know we will. We'll be okay. But for me personally, there is a part of my own soul that I've guarded from feeling it, right? Because I don't want to feel that sense of letting go. But I also know, as a father, that letting her go is what is going to cause her to become who she truly is. That's it. And she'll never become who she truly is if she's always under, me in some sense, or under her mother, or here in this house. Not that
guarded and protected and kept safe.
Exactly. I have to be vulnerable enough to love her enough to allow her to be vulnerable, which leaves me feeling vulnerable because I feel like she's vulnerable. But that vulnerability is like what unlocks you. It's what unlocks everything that is like within you that otherwise would just remain within you until the day you die as unfulfilled potential. But the more you live life, the further you journey into the adventure of life, the more you're rendered out to be fully who you really are, and who you. It's like in a video game, you start off as like, go back to the simplest of video games, like Super Mario Brothers, the original from the 80s.
I've never played a video game. You could be speaking Greek to me. I wouldn't know the difference.
Well, let me take you back to 1982 with Super Mario Brothers. No, so you start off as this little.
Recall that I was alive then. Yes.
You start off as this little plumber, this little guy. You get the mushroom, you become a little bigger. You get the fire flower. Now you can throw fireballs. As the games evolve, you can get a leaf and you get raccoon ears and a tail and you can fly, whatever. All that sounds nonsensical, and it is. But the point is, the more you start off as this plumber, like literally the character's a plumber. But the more he goes through the adventure of the game and he experiences the, exotic dangers of whatever land he finds himself in, the more of who he is becomes unlocked. The more he, and as games themselves have become more complex over the years, the complexity of the character is greater, and more of the character becomes unlocked. And, some of these games that you can pause and come back and play for years and years, your character becomes more developed and unlocked, and its giftings, whatever, the character becomes more finely rendered, the more danger you expose it to. And it's the same with us. The more we expose ourselves, the more finely rendered we become, the more of ourselves we become, the more, my deep expresses itself. I don't, me crying out to God from the depths of my soul is one thing. Me releasing my daughter, it doesn't get any deeper than that in terms of my love. Me releasing that into the universe or into God and saying, I trust you. That's far deeper than crying until I have no voice left, right? But even then, when I cry with my voice, something happens in me. When I cry by releasing my loved ones and saying, I trust you, they become more fully who they are. And I don't know.
I think that we are self-liberating entities.
Yeah.
That we have to be, because We can't spend our lives asking permission to evolve. We evolve whether or not we have permission to do so.
Yeah.
But when you hear the phrase, let go and let God, peace be still and know that I am God. That metaphysical that we express physically with our voices, with our the tears that manifest, the wailing, the crying, the pitiful emotional turmoil and desperation and loneliness that all of us experience at some point in life, as part of, I think, as part of our evolution. Coming to terms, I wrote down, you said something a few minutes ago that really inspired me about the thesis becoming the synthesis. And we are, I think that we are thesis and the antithesis of the thesis simultaneously. And when I gather, like at Houghton Lake, when we gather together and we do UFO contact and we make contact, there are people that do research, ufology, whatever. I was a ufologist, but way decades before that term was invented and introduced into the vernacular. But it wasn't that I was studying, I was experiencing. And that was different. And that's what opened me up and simultaneously closed me down. You've heard me say 1,000 times, I feel like I was born on the island of misfit toys. I didn't fit. I didn't belong. I was weird. I was different. I had to fake it. Fake it till you make it is a real thing. And it wasn't until I was in my late 40s that I gained enough self-knowledge and confidence to not care what ridicule or belittling I might receive from, for instance, telling our family story about the farmhouse in my books. I didn't care anymore. Suddenly didn't care. And it was more important to share the story than it was to, Mom said it best when she said, this is not the kind of story that one should rightfully take to the grave. What's the point of experiencing what we did and then never telling anyone what happened? What value is there? Beyond our core family, what value is there if nobody learns a thing from what we experienced because we were too fearful to share that experience, come what may?
Right.
And so in terms of our own spiritual metamorphosis as a family, I mean, there are things that didn't get put in my books, Jeff, because my sisters were afraid to share those stories. And I have subsequently been given permission to share those stories that didn't go into the books because they reached a level of acceptance from the paranormal community where they were embraced and cherished and honored for speaking their truth, that liberated others to speak their truth about their encounters. And that was the whole point. And I didn't realize it at the time as that I was writing the books. I didn't realize it then. It was subsequently after the books were complete and out to the world, and I was getting massive amounts of feedback. And I kept hearing the same thing over and over and over again. I'm not afraid anymore. If your family was courageous enough to not only endure what you did, but then to share it, then I have nothing to fear. And I heard that over and over in a multitude of letters and interviews, and that inspires me, because I see the spiritual metamorphosis that's occurring on multiple levels and layers. And when we gather at Houghton Lake for UFO contact, and I tell people from here up, clear it, completely clear it. Now, there are other people who work in this field who rely exclusively on meditation to make contact, exclusively. It's about thinking, it's not about feeling. Right. And what the woman on Gaia was saying, and I don't even know who she is. I don't know her personally. But she was absolutely right. This has nothing to do with contact. It's all here. As E.T. said, turn on your heart light. And when you do that, not only are you able to connect on an intimate and a spiritual and a deeply affectionate way with our fellow human beings, but we are able to connect out and above ourselves, and feel that integration and that synthesis occur between thesis, antithesis, becomes synthesis.
Exactly. Yep. That's it. And, my model of prayer is to simply let go. You know what I mean? We try so many methods, so many things we try to do. But it really is as simple as when I pray. My deepest moments of prayer are when I lay on my bed, on my back. That's for me, just the whatever. And I just
complete relaxation.
And I go from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes, sometimes from my toes to the top of my head. And I just release every bit of tension in every muscle, my face, until I'm like completely relinquished. I am not holding on to anything. And then I just say, here I am. And those are those moments where, I may as well have been plugged. I may as well have stuck my finger into a light socket sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
But then there are times where you're striving and you're doing all the things you're told to do by all the spiritual teachers, and you're frustrated and it doesn't work, But sometimes the frustration and the thing not working is engineered precisely so that you will finally come to the end of yourself and say, I give up. And then when you finally give up, that's when you've spoken from your heart. That's when you turn on your heart light and Neil Diamond sings the accompanying song from the movie, and you emit. It's like a positive chum in the water to the that draws the. That's a terrible analogy, but
it is. It really does. That's a sucky analogy. It should be like Jaws and blood. Okay, no.
So inverse that. So reverse that somehow. But it's but it does. It brings it to you, But I think in the opposite, it absolutely can work in the opposite way too. When you emit only the negative, there are negative forces that feed off of that too. But I think the deepest thing that anyone can do for their spiritual life is to simply let go, and sometimes it's to stop having to try to. Sometimes it's to stop trying to have a spiritual life. Is how you actually attain a deep spiritual life.
I know it seems entirely counterintuitive, right. And when you really think about it, it makes perfect sense.
And that's the synthesis of thesis and antithesis. I was born in a religious context where I tried desperately to have a spiritual life. Then I had the antithesis of becoming like an atheist for a season, and those two things were really the same thing in reverse. And then I came to the point where I realized I was really kind of doing the same thing on different levels, and I just stopped. And when I stopped doing either pushing in this direction or that direction, everything came rushing back to me, and I found myself absolutely swallowed up in the divine in a way that I had never experienced before, while all of my doubts stayed intact, and they were allowed to remain intact, and I was allowed to have them in the context of the experience, and I was a full and complete person. Like Marie-Louise von Franz says, it's one thing to be a naive idealist, it's one thing to be a cynical realist, it's another thing entirely to hold no more illusions and yet to still hold the inner flame. And that's the synthesis of the two things.
Absolutely. When I got my diagnosis, I had my surrender Dorothy moment. I also had the same, simultaneously, the same moment. Give me the fucking broomstick now.
Yeah.
At the same time that I had my surrender Dorothy moment.
Yeah.
Give me the broomstick.
Right.
I'm going for a wild ride. And it was one and the same. There was this culmination of the physical and the metaphysical, the spiritual and the empirical, and the ephemeral, and the everything was wrapped up in one thing, in one moment.
Yeah.
For me. And boom. It was not a brush with death, but a brush with life. And I am looking at you tonight, looking into your eyes, my darling, and telling you that with stage 4 cancer, with my body riddled with tumors, which are shrinking and going away, by the way, because, higher ups. I have never felt so alive.
Yeah.
I have never wanted my life as much as I do. I have never been so defiant in the face of the evil I perceive cancer to be. And I know, I don't believe, I know I can kill it one cell at a time if necessary. Until it is gone from my body and I am whole and I am pure and I am healed. And then I know the way, so that in the way that you extended your hand to me, I can extend my hand to anyone else that finds themselves in a predicament where they feel hopeless and helpless. I don't allow either of those words to have any meaning in my consciousness. 6 months ago, I did. I don't anymore. So metamorphosis can come through a variety of methods, but I can't think of anything more powerful than suddenly having the realization that your life is being threatened by mutating cells. Get out. Now.
Yep.
Yeah. Or, my favorite verbalization of it is get the fuck out of my big fat fluffy temple now. Get out.
Yes.
And then comes a plethora of all my favorite curse words. And it is so cleansing. It is so healing to express my contempt for something that would dare to intrude in my classroom and must be expelled.
Yes. Yep.
And so I reach up to the cosmos. I reach out by handing myself over to the fates. And I'm so comfortable with that. It's so liberating to not feel like I'm constantly, okay, wrap when you can. Okay, we're going to wrap it up because the big guy behind the curtain, the wizard, says that we are out of time. Let's do this again very soon. And I will see you hopefully next week. I will see you on Soul School. We'll come up with something fabulous to discuss.
Yes.
I love you all. To those who join us for this show, for Soul School, know that Jeff and I appreciate you as much as you appreciate us. And remember, as you go forth into this new week, to be the beacon, to always be the beacon and be the light that you seek. Jeff, thank you so much. I love you. Good night, everyone. Have a sweet, wonderful evening.